I became interested in historic preservation largely as a result of growing up in 1970s sprawl of Brandon, Florida, where there really wasn't any downtown or any walking district that you could go to, but through traveling and visiting family in other parts of the country, realizing that there was historic architecture out there and a different way of living. And it was something that planted a seed in my mind, and it became something I wanted to pursue and to study.
My earliest memory of historic preservation would be, I think I was around 10 years old. I grew up in a big house in a small town in Nebraska. And I remember my parents saying that they wanted to take out the wood storm windows and screens and put in aluminum storms. And I remember crying, and I don't even know where I got this philosophy that was not the right thing to do to this house, but it came from somewhere.
I got interested because of a sign in Avery Library that was offering a free summer in Hawaii. And it turned out that the free summer in Hawaii was measuring historic buildings. I think it was Iolani Palace.
I knew that I was interested in art history. I knew I was interested specifically in architecture, but didn't see myself necessarily in a museum or any kind of traditional setting like that, so wasn't really sure what options there might be. So I was traveling and doing other things and was always gravitating towards architecture and thinking about what kind of person is responsible for making that architecture still hang around, still be there for us to appreciate.
What I learned at Columbia has definitely had an impact in my professional career. First, there are people that I met here that I had the privilege to work with during my professional practice. But also, what you learn here is just not about materials, conservation, or theory. It's really about the overall idea of what preservation is about or is supposed to be about.
My experience at Columbia, it's changed over time, or how it influenced my career. At first, it was a great introduction to New York City. So having come from outside of the city, understanding how all the different neighborhoods, because old buildings don't come to you, you go to them.
I think that one of the contributions this program has made is that, again, back to Jim Fitch, his idea of the multidisciplinary studio was very much part of the very beginning. And I would say that's probably the standard for all preservation programs in America these days, because it's really the kind of core for how we work together.
Fitch felt very strongly that you didn't have to be an architect to be a historic preservationist. And boy, was he ever right. And at that point, most people felt that if you weren't an architect, you couldn't be a preservationist. And so his conviction about that is probably my most indelible memory of being in the course here at Columbia.
One of my favorite memories about my time at Columbia is what I call my Tuesdays with Jan. I worked part-time for Jan Pokorny's office while I was a student, and Jan would teach on Tuesday afternoons, and I would work in the office Tuesday mornings, and he would give me a lift in his cab ride up to Columbia. It was any number of topics, whether it was a building that we passed that he had worked on, something about the Columbia curriculum that he was thinking about or rethinking about, or just some wonderful story about New York from 50 years ago. And I think that we have all of these opportunities to interact with professors as graduate students in an academic setting, and this was a very personal setting that really helped to shape my professional development.
When we got to visit Fitch at his apartment, and we went, and I was just somehow sort of surprised to see that he lived in such a modern building. And we had this great conversation with him. We asked him what his favorite building in New York was, and he said the Seagram building. And I was sort of surprised by that too, and it was just an interesting thing to realize that, you can really love modern architecture and still do preservation.
One thing that was very important, aside from the experience with the professors and the high quality people that you had around, was also the students. very engaging, very active, very smart people, and I made very good friends here. My friends in New York come from that period in the school. I graduated in 2005, and they're still my very good friends. I met my husband here as well in the program.
This past the week I went to a talk at the AIA, and there were several people there, former students. They were not even in my class, but you start meeting people and you have this relationship, and you always go back to your experience at the program. I think they foster a very good sense that this is for life. You come in here and it's you're attached to it for a long time.
I graduated 15 years ago, and I still get a little nostalgic when I have to walk across campus, and I still like to come up to Avery to do research.
Here I am, the director of the program that I went to, and sometimes I walk in here in the morning to Columbia and I have to pinch myself because it's really hard for me to believe that I came from being a student under Jim Fitch, which was really inspiring, to following in his footsteps and being the director of this incredible program, and that I'm helping to develop the legacy of this really fantastic place.
I think the preservation is at a really interesting moment right now, because I think that if you look at what's happening in the urban world, there's so many urban blogs, everyone's talking about architecture, everyone seems to have an opinion on what their neighborhood needs or what shouldn't be there, and I think it's this interesting moment where people are particularly people in their 20s and 30s, are starting to think about what matters to them in a place like New York.
I think the challenges for preservation are to make it more relevant to the other fields, such as sustainability or new buildings. I think people don't understand that preservation is part of our everyday lives. We need to show that existing buildings require preservation and that it can be a really innovative and exciting field.
Well, I think the program has gone from strength to strength, and I think it is a wonderful way to draw a lot of folks with different kinds of interests and skills into this really important multidisciplinary field, and everybody should just keep it up.
Well, it's really amazing to me that the Historic Preservation Program at Columbia is 50 years old. It was, of course, the first preservation program in the United States, and it's now 50 years old. It could be listed on the National Register now. And I think really we're just beginning. Preservation is a really dynamic field. It's constantly changing, and Columbia is changing with it to be the leader for preservation in the 21st century.